So as Richard said, I'm going to talk a little bit about insurance and then drift on to risk management. I'll give an overview of what's happening in the insurance industry very swiftly. Clearly there's a lot happening, so it will be brief and concise, and then look a bit forward and speculate about some changes that you might think about making. You might be there already, so forgive me if you are. Firstly, on the overall financial state of the insurance industry. The rating agencies generally are judging this to be a manageable event. Capital is regarded as being adequate to cope with the claims that will arise from COVID. And I'll get on in a minute to what those claims might be. The comparator would probably be a large natural catastrophe. In fact, the chief executive of Chubb Insurance Company said this is a manageable cat risk exposure, i.e. like a big series of hurricanes or storms which happen several times over the years. That's the sort of scale. So it's not a threat to the solvency of the industry or probably to any individual insurers, although one can speculate with less confidence about that. There is a bit of a caveat on that, which I'll get to. Overall, premium volume is probably going to be down because the economy slowed. So premium volume roughly tracks the economy. So obvious areas like aviation will be spending less on insurance in the short term. Investment income clearly be down. So there'll be P&L pressures on insurance companies, and that I'll get to. It will show through in the trading conditions which buyers of insurance will experience. So where have the claims come from in the short term? This is a huge subject. I'm going to race through it. Some obvious areas: event cancellation. Swiss Re famously $210 million for the postponement of the Tokyo Olympics. Credit insurance, travel insurance, sickness insurance, clearly, and in the life insurance sector, which tends to be looked at rather separately, clearly some ramifications. The big area of concern, and you've possibly seen it in the press, is business interruption. And this would be worthy of a webinar on its own, but needless to say, most business interruption policies would not cover any exposure from COVID or indeed from pandemics. There are exceptions in the hospitality industry, and even there, the words really matter. So there's a lot of discussion, controversy. Governments are getting involved. You probably would have seen in the United States, the state governments in 5 or 6 states, and indeed Congress itself is getting involved to possibly try and retroactively change the conditions of policies to bring in cover for COVID. That would be a disaster for the industry, as many commentators are observing. So watch this space. Future expectations of claims. They're expected to be obviously cyber insurance claims, and Richard mentioned that in the list of subjects which or the audience has expressed interest in. There are thought to be an upsurge in professional indemnity type claims coming from all sorts of areas, contract disputes, insolvencies perhaps, and of course suits against directors and officers, particularly in the United States for reasons pertaining directly and indirectly to the COVID outbreak. So at the moment, we've got a claims picture emerging which is suggesting a difficult climate, making the trading conditions even more difficult for insurers. So market effects in the very short term, lots of questioning about cybersecurity. Is the system adequate for the working from home? Is the security adequate? Are procedures in place? What's the endpoint security like? Is incident response working and fit for a complete remote application? These are the sort of questions. There's quite a long list. If anyone's interested, I can supply that. Policy terms in current negotiations, we haven't seen a lot of change, but we do expect to see it as the year builds up. The market was already in a position where it was tightening terms, so I think we'll see more and more of that. So looking to the future, and with an eye to time, future conditions in the insurance industry will vary. It will very much depend on geography and line of insurance, but the market was getting tougher. It will get a lot tougher. If you've got renewals coming up in your firm, start early, expect to get a lot of questions, some of them quite intrusive, about your business operations, your finances. We're pushing back on those because firms are quite uncomfortable. But also business continuity management and cybersecurity are the big areas of inquiry. The challenge for the insurance industry is to be innovative. Now, that challenge was there already. There were a lot of pressures to build new products to cope with the risks of the digital society which we're in. Intellectual property, reputation risk, interestingly, that's coming up a lot in today's climate. The industry is going to be challenged now around pandemics. There is cover for pandemics, very, very low take-up, indeed zero take-up in many areas, but clearly there'll be a lot of pressure for that. And there is discussion in several countries about a government response in alliance with the insurance industry, as we've seen for terrorism, for example. And finally, on risk management, we do a survey every year where we results by sector. It is clear in all sectors, but particularly in professional services, that the conventional risks were becoming less important and external shocks were being regarded as more threatening. This was before COVID. Pandemics would come in at 8, 9 or 10 on the list if it made the top 10. We obviously expect to see a change there with a recency bias. We'll push it up into the top 3, no doubt. So what's the effect on risk management? I would say a move from compliance-based approach, the traditional compilation of a risk register with effect and severity, to a far broader holistic look where risk becomes part of strategy and techniques such as horizon scanning, scenario planning are used to build resilience. And that's the word which entered the risk management profession some years ago. It's about dealing with risks which you cannot control yourself, but you have to manage the consequences of. And I think we'll see more and more of that. In today's world, crisis management failures will not really be forgiven, notwithstanding the circumstances. Reputation is the ultimate crown jewel, which is under threat if there are not adequate responses in place. So in summary, Richard, I think complexity is increasing. The older assumptions around risk management will be challenged, and there'll be more attention on unexpected, low probability, but high severity risks.